I can't think of anything more important we can do in education than to get students to challenge these fundamental premises which keep us inside a certain box. And we want people to think outside of that, because if they don't, things will never change. If they don't think outside that box, if they don't challenge the premises, then we'll go on as we have been going on, and then we'll have the kind of world that we have had so far, which is not good enough, right? A world of war and hunger and disease and inequality and racism and sexism. We don't know. We want to move away from that, and so we have to re-examine, these premises. One of these is the idea that we all have a common interest in society. There's that we're one big happy family. That's like the first words of the preamble of the Constitution, we the people of the United States. But of course, we know it wasn't we the people of the United States who established the Constitution. It was 55 rich white men in Philadelphia who established the Constitution. And the Revolution, the American Revolution, was not fought by we the people, by all the people. No, there was a lot of dissent and disagreement, and there was soldiers' mutinies. And when the Constitution was finally adopted, it was only adopted in reaction to rebellions of farmers in western Massachusetts who saw the rich in Boston taxing them so heavily, and many of these veterans of the Revolutionary War. No, there was class conflict before the Revolution, during the Revolution, after the Revolution, and represented finally by a Constitution which was set up to favor the interests of the upper classes. I mean, after all, the Constitution established the rule of slaveholders and merchants and bondholders, and it had elements of democracy, it had some elements of representative government, but my point is it was a class document. They didn't all have the same interests. And all through American history, we have not had the same interests. We have had people on the top, and we've had people on the bottom, and in between, we've had a lot of nervous people. So, after all, I think it's important people think for young people to think about, so that they don't simply swallow these enveloping phrases like, the national interest, national security, national defense, as if we're all in the same boat. No, the soldier who is sent to Iraq does not have the same interest as the president who sends him to Iraq. The person who works on the assembly line in General Motors does not have the same interest as the CEO of General Motors. No, we're a country of divided interests, and it's important for people to know that. Because it's important for people to know their own interest and not confuse their interest with the interest of the people up on high. Because the people up on high, of course, in order to stay up on high, have to persuade the people below them that they all have the same interest. They don't. And, you take the language, the culture lends itself to this idea of, we all have the same interest with, national security. And for some people, a small number of people, national security means military strength. I would say that for most people, national security means having a job, having health care, having a decent standard of living, different definitions of security. So that's one kind of premise that I think needs to be examined. Another one, I think, one that we're all prone to, one we all grow up with, and that is the premise that the United States is somehow unique in the world. Well, of course, every place is unique and every country is unique. That's not the point. But unique, not just unique, but better, the best. Number one, we are the greatest, right? We are, well, That's a dangerous thing to think. Because when you begin to think that arrogantly, that somehow the United States is, an exception to the things that plague other countries and other governments in the world, that is dangerous for people. It's dangerous for people in other countries, and it's dangerous for people in our country to begin to think that way. That kind of arrogance leads to trouble. In the world of social science, that notion, that premise is called American exceptionalism. And I think that's something that young people need to re-examine. I think that we need to have an honest view of our country, not in order to put it down, but to see it in the context of countries in the world. I think that's where history comes in handy. But because, for instance, if you look at the history of American expansion in the world, right? We have expanded, haven't we? Yeah, we've expanded. We were just a thin band of colonies along the East Coast, and we expanded across the continent. And I remember when I went to school, it all seemed very benign. It was the Louisiana Purchase. It was empty. It was a huge, huge, huge tract of empty land. Only much later it suddenly struck me, hey, there were people living there. There were indigenous people there, hundreds of tribes there. We had to get rid of them in order for it to be ours, in order for our railroads to crisscross that land and for our corporations to move into that land. But we were an expansionist country from the beginning. There's the Louisiana Purchase. There's the Mexican Cession. I like that word, cession. They just ceded it to us. They're friendly people. Just say, no, we fought a war with Mexico, and then we took almost half of their land. Now we build a wall along the southern to keep them out of the land we took from them. It's really neat. Yes. But yeah, expansions. Then we expand, and you know this history. We expand into the Caribbean with Cuba and Puerto Rico, and we expanded the Pacific with Hawaii and the Philippines, and of course after World War II, and now we have military bases in 100 countries. Well, so you can't really say that the United States, is different in a good way, that we're different because we spread democracy and liberty around the world. Because if you look at the history of what happened in those countries that we spread to and occupied, we did not bring liberty and democracy to these places where we fought wars and conquered. And the reason for people knowing this history is so that, again, not to derogate our country, not to be sour and critical, but to say, we're an empire like other empires. There was a British Empire, and there was a Dutch Empire, and there was a Spanish Empire, and yes, and we are an American empire, let's face it. And we are prone to all the same things that other empires have been prone to, and that is to take advantage of other people and to beat them down when they rebel. No, so that when some leader comes and says, the United States we go around and we spread democracy and liberty, and tomorrow we're going to go into this place and we're going to spread democracy and liberty there. Well, that's where it's important for young people to know their history. So they say, now wait a while, let's be honest about ourselves, and let's not rush into this on the ground that we are beneficent in everything we do and we take care of other people in the world. Of course, when you talk this way, and I say, it's just a matter of being honest about yourself, and all of us as individuals need to be honest about ourselves as individuals, and then very often you're accused of being unpatriotic.